This is Matt Nelson of the Word on Fire Institute, and I'm here with one of our Word on Fire Institute fellows and the managing editor of our Evangelization and Culture Journal, Dr. Todd Warner. It is good to be talking to you, but I want to jump right into the topic of the talk that you're going to be giving at the Good News Conference. In that talk, you talk about this great disconnect that we're all finding ourselves caught in. What do you mean by the great disconnect?
Great. Yeah, Matt, as Catholics, as Christians living in this world, obviously, there's just an incredible amount of darkness, a lot of suffering, a lot of pain. We have to navigate our lives through that, and yet at the same time, we're living in a world that has an all-loving God that makes these extraordinary promises to us. And so what I kind of talk about in the talk is how do we reckon with this? Mm-hmm. How do we reckon with an all-loving God in a world full of darkness? I say sometimes it's almost like Chico Marx is up there in heaven looking down at us and saying, who are you going to trust, me or your lying eyes? I mean, sometimes the realities that we suffer through are so pressing that the promises of God get lost in the midst of it.
So how do you deal with that then with in your talk? What are the ways that we how do we become resilient facing this great disconnect?
It's funny because to treat this topic, which has been thousands of pounds of ink have been spilled over this, even more than that, over many, many years. It's something that obviously can't be completely encapsulated in one short talk. There's three things I like to emphasize, though. The first thing is to look at the crucifix. When I talk about that, I talk about as a former Protestant who looked at an empty cross, and now as a Catholic looks at a cross with this body on it. To look at the crucifix and see the crucified Christ, we understand that there's a God there that suffered for and with us. Mm-hmm. So this is not a God that's aloof to all the darkness in the world. He's the one that went through it, and he went through it on our behalf. So the first thing to do is to look at the crucifix. The second thing is to trust in the mystery. One of the things that, mystery, the capital M, we live our lives with so much uncertainty. And so much imperfection, and that's galling to us. And I always like to say that 95% of my life's woes would be better if I could take care of things that were uncertain and things that were imperfect in my life. And the fact is, that stuff's always going to be there. Yeah. So to some extent, we need to have faith enough to trust in the mystery that God has put before us, to look at life as a wonderful adventure, not some scary ride that we have to be a victim on. Mm-hmm. So look to the crucifix, trust in the mystery. Finally, live like a saint. At the end of the day, when we have suffering that our God has gone through for us and with us, at the end of the day, when we have uncertainty that bathes us as we move throughout our lives, the best thing we can do is to grasp onto orthodoxy, to grasp on that which is firm and true and will ultimately lead us into the good graces of God, into eternity, into heaven. If we do those three things, look at the crucifix, trust in the mystery, live like a saint, I think we'll be in a much better place in dealing with the ups and downs that life has to offer.
Well, I want to talk about those three things a little more. Sure. You're a practicing internal medicine physician, and you teach medical students. And when you teach medical students, you often use references to literature and historical examples to try to get your points across to these classes as you form them to become doctors one day. So you've brought then that gift now to this particular topic, making literary references and making historical references. So let's start with the first one, looking to the crucifix. What additional light can you shed on that particular aspect of your presentation? In particular, what would you reference as far as literature or history goes in that respect?
One of the great references I like to tap into is Georges Bernanot, a great French Catholic writer, novelist who wrote The Diary of a Country Priest. Mm-hmm. Some of the most gripping, most haunting works that have formed me as a Catholic, that brought me into the Catholic faith, mm-hmm. are the ones that involve suffering. Mm-hmm. And Bernanot's work, Diary of a Country Priest, is so much about the agony this priest goes through in the midst of answering his calling. And there's so many extraordinarily raw experiences, but also raw insights he provides as he goes through this suffering. And so Bernanot is almost, along with Flannery O'Connor, are probably two of the greatest people that can talk about what it means to look to the suffering of Christ, but also to live with that suffering as a reassurance that we're on the right path.
What about the trust in the mystery aspect?
Yeah, a certain amount of that comes from Gerard Manley Hopkins. I mean, so many of his poems delve into the notion of embracing God's grandeur. Even when we can't completely understand it, we can almost just sit in awe before it. Another one is Job. Job effectively, challenging God, saying, "I'm a righteous man, why am I suffering?" And God basically putting the second creation story before him in the most vivid of forms, and Job kind of falling silent, realizing, I know so little about how you made the physical universe. How much can I even dictate to you how you operate the moral universe? So that's an example.
It's interesting you talk about Gerard Manley Hopkins as somebody who can really shed light on this. What role does poetry play, just to build on this a little bit, in helping us appreciate the mystery of creation and the mystery of even the existence of great evil, in light of the fact that there still is this loving, all powerful, all good God? And helping us to understand that mysterious dynamic between the two. How does poetry help us to reckon with the mystery?
I remember, Matt, being a fourth grader shaking my fist at Miss Duffy, not literally, but figuratively, having to memorize Robert Frost stopping by woods on a snowy evening. I thought, this woman is putting me through agony and having to stand before the class. It's only years later that I realized that poem still, deep in my marrow, speaks to a lot of the experiences I've had in my life. Poetry, it endures and it speaks so eloquently to the human experience that I just think it's probably a disservice that we do to ourselves and to others if we don't delve into it. So any kids that are out there, or any high school students or college students that are upset with poets or poetry teachers and so on, I would just simply say, delve into it. It is a timeless exploration of the human condition, and all we need to do is we need to revisit it again and again.
I remember in high school we had a poetry writing assignment, and we used it basically to write poems about, like me and my buddies, used it to write poems about each other, basically to have a roasting session.
Very good.
And so, but now having grown up and matured, I've come to appreciate poetry as something that we talk about a lot. And it was a missed opportunity, I think, at that time. And so I think I'm glad that you're referencing Hopkins and the other poets that you will. Lots more to say about that, but we don't have time. So let's jump into the third aspect, which was it act like a saint?
Live like a saint.
Live like a saint? Okay.
Yeah. At the end of the day, the notion is, again, like I said, grasping onto orthodoxy and all that it offers, all that it provides. I guess what I would say specifically that I cite in there is Chesterton. Here's Chesterton, who finds his way, he finds all the arguments against the philosophies of the day, and he feels that he's kind of backed his way into this kind of comfortable but very insightful type of a worldview. The long and the short of it is he realizes that the Catholic Church was there 1900 years before he had arrived. Orthodoxy in the eyes of Chesterton is a reeling adventure. It is not pious, kind of sour-faced saints. It is the fullness of existing in truth day in and day out. So Chesterton is one of the great people that I like to reference in that particular part of the speech.
All right, thanks. That was great. We could talk about Chesterton for another hour, but we don't have time. So thank you so much.
You bet.
And for all of you watching, go to wordonfire.institute, where you'll access all kinds of great content, including Dr. Warner's course and so much more. And please subscribe to our YouTube channel. So that's the YouTube channel for the Word on Fire Institute for a lot more great content. And we hope to see you inside.